He let her take my place like I was nothing. While she smiled in my seat, I walked away, silently, gracefully, without a scene. Months later, when I returned, I wasn't alone. I came back wearing a new ring. That's when he realized he lost me forever. There are 1,000 ways to lose someone. But the worst is when they give your place away while you're still sitting in the room. The investor gala was held at the Rosewood Grand. Everything about it screamed exclusivity. The frosted chandeliers, the glass staircases, the hushed tones of men discussing acquisitions like sports scores. I was supposed to be proud. Adrian had just been promoted to regional head at YW Capital. This night was as much his as it was mine. Or so I thought. I arrived 10 minutes late, thanks to a client who wouldn't stop emailing. The elevator doors opened to the ballroom and I stepped into a world I knew too well. Pressed suits, flute glasses, camera flashes, and the low hum of Mandarin-accented English. I scanned the room for the reserved table with our name on the card. Adrian Wu and guest. And I saw it. Table 7. Adrian sat at the center. Kara sat beside him. My seat. I froze for a beat. Surely it was temporary. A placeholder. A mistake. But then I saw it. Her hand gently resting on the curve of Adrian's arm as she leaned in to whisper something. He smiled. I felt the weight of my clutch bag suddenly double in my hand. Miss Chin, a server asked. Would you like me to take you to your table? My voice didn't work at first. Then I nodded slowly. Yes. Thank you. He didn't take me to table 7. He led me to table 10. Off to the side. Slightly behind a structural column. Less visible. Less everything. I sat. Alone. Adrian didn't even look over. Kara laughed at something he said, head tilted, fingers grazing her wine glass like she belonged there. I tried to breathe through it. This wasn't jealousy. I had no reason to feel threatened. I had been with Adrian for 8 years. We shared an apartment, a dog, matching toothbrush cups, and long Sunday grocery lists. I knew his passwords, his insecurities, the rhythm of his late-night foot taps when he couldn't sleep. But at that moment he felt like a stranger in someone else's suit. My phone buzzed. A message from Jay, my cousin. Jay, is it true Kara's sitting next to Adrian? I heard from a trader in the room. Want me to come raise hell? I typed. Me, stay calm. Let me watch how this plays out. Another message buzzed in. Jay, you always watch. That's the problem. I spent the evening watching my own relationship unravel from across the room. A quiet unraveling. No scenes. No drama. Just silence. The kind of silence that says you're being replaced, and no one felt the need to warn you. The MC took the stage to introduce Adrian's promotion. Let's give a warm round of applause to our new regional head, Mr. Adrian Wu. Applause. Flashbulbs. Adrian stood, smile gleaming. Kara touched his shoulder as he rose. I clenched the linen napkin in my lap so hard I heard it tear. The speaker continued. This achievement would not be possible without the tireless support of his team, especially his executive assistant, Miss Kara Lin. More applause. I stood. Quietly. No one noticed. The hallway outside the ballroom was marble and mirrors. I walked to the ladies' room, locked myself inside a stall, and stared at the back of the door for what felt like years. I didn't cry. Crying would make it real. Instead I counted breaths. My mind played back every recent sign I ignored. Or Adrian leaving early and coming home later. The new cologne I didn't buy. The sudden defensiveness when I asked about Kara's presence at late meetings. And the worst part? He never cheated in a way that could be proven. He just transferred intimacy. Inch by inch. Day by day. When I stepped out of the stall, I stared at my reflection. My lipstick had faded. My eyes looked tired. Not broken but weathered. A woman stood at the sink beside me. She glanced over and said, "Your mirror, right?" I blinked. Yes. You looked so composed at the table. I'd have slapped someone. I smiled faintly. And what good would that do? He shrugged. Maybe none. But it'd feel good. When I returned, Adrian was surrounded by colleagues. He caught sight of me and waved vaguely. Kara turned too, her smile widening just enough to acknowledge me, but not enough to give anything away. I gave them a slight nod, then left the ballroom without a word. The apartment was dark when I got home. Our dog Miso greeted me at the door. I changed out of my gown, wiped off my makeup and sat on the edge of the bed. My heels lay tossed on the carpet like punctuation marks to a chapter one hadn't realized was ending. I opened my laptop. Typed 2 emails. 1. To my landlord. Please consider this formal notice. I'll be vacating within the next 2 weeks. 2. To HR at YW Capital under a pseudonym. Anonymously reporting that your regional head may be in a relationship with his direct assistant, potentially violating interoffice ethics policy. Just thought you should know. Then I opened a blank note. Typed. You let her sit in my seat. So I left the table. At 3 a.m. Adrian returned. I watched from the kitchen as he removed his shoes and loosened his tie. He didn't notice I was still awake. Hey, he said casually. You okay? I nodded. You looked happy tonight. He smiled. Yeah. Big night. Didn't realize Kara was your date. His smile faltered slightly. She wasn't, she just happened to be there when you were late. Right. I told her to move, he added quickly. She just didn't. You didn't ask again. Pause. Babe, don't do this. Don't do what? Make something out of nothing. I stepped forward. Adrian, when was the last time you introduced me as your girlfriend? He stared. What does that have to do with? It's been over a year. Silence. You've been rewriting our story behind my back, I said softly. Erasing me. One public moment at a time. Mira. I'm leaving. His brows snapped together. You're overreacting. I'm not angry, I said. That's the scariest part. I just don't care anymore. He reached for my hand. I pulled away. That night I slept on the couch. At sunrise I booked a one-way flight to Kyoto. And I didn't say goodbye. There was no dramatic suitcase slamming, no shouting match. Just a closed bedroom door and a silent morning. Adrian was still asleep when I left. Miso followed me to the door, tail wagging faintly, confused. I crouched down and kissed her furry forehead, whispering, "You'll be okay." I was less sure about myself. I slipped my key into a small envelope and placed it on the kitchen counter, next to the empty wine glasses Adrian and Kara had used after one of their team dinners. The smell of her perfume still lingered faintly in the air. I didn't want to take anything. Not the matching dishes. Not the photos. I packed only the essentials. My sketchbooks, my travel palette, and 3 pairs of shoes. The ring Adrian gave me on our 6th anniversary? I left it in the drawer beside a note that read, "Return this to whoever you meant it for." I landed in Kyoto just past midnight. The airport was nearly empty. I moved through customs with a weightless sort of numbness, as though I were gliding, not walking. Jay had set everything up. "You're not running," he said before I left. "You're restoring." It had a nice ring to it. Something between poetry and a lawyer's justification. He'd arranged for me to stay in a private guest villa just outside Gion, owned by one of his old friends, a venture capital firm based in Osaka. The firm belonged to Leo Mori, though I'd only ever heard his name in passing. It was quiet, peaceful. The air smelled like stone and pine and earth. The villa had an inner garden with a koi pond and wooden sliding doors that opened to the sunrise. For the first time in years I heard my own thoughts again, and they didn't terrify me. The next morning, I woke to the soft rustle of leaves and the gentle clink of porcelain. A tray had been left outside my door. Miso soup, rice, grilled fish, and a small white card that simply read, "Welcome. Stay as long as you need. L." 4 days I said nothing to anyone. I walked the philosopher's path, visited temples, sketched cherry blossoms in my notebook. My phone stayed off. No emails. No news. No Adrian. I thought I'd feel grief. Panic. Anger. But mostly I felt relief. It was a rainy afternoon when I finally met Leo Mori. I was sitting in the villa's library, sketching a broken teacup I'd found on the shelf. Its crack glued perfectly with gold in the style of kintsugi, the Japanese art of honoring damage. "You see beauty in broken things," a quiet voice said from behind me. I turned. Leo stood at the door, tall, slender, dressed in charcoal and navy. He had sharp cheekbones and his dark hair was slightly tousled. But what struck me most was his gaze. It wasn't cold. It was still. Moving. Deep water. "I see the stories they still carry," I replied. He stepped forward and looked down at my drawing. "Interesting that you chose that cup," he murmured. It was my mother's. I broke it when I was 7. Tried to hide it. She found it anyway and made me glue it back together. You did well. I used too much gold. She laughed for an hour. I smiled faintly. Leo didn't ask for my name. He didn't ask why I was there. He simply said, "I'll bring more tea." Over the next week we formed a quiet routine. I painted. He read. Sometimes we crossed paths in the hallway, exchanged a few words, sometimes not. He was always calm. Gentle in a way most powerful men never were. There was no boasting. No flattery. Just small, kind gestures. A favorite pastry left on the tray. A rare ink set he said, might inspire new lines. I didn't realize how much I craved that sort of care. Thoughtful. Intentional. Unspoken. On the 10th day he knocked on my door and said, "There's a Tanabata lantern ceremony tonight. Would you like to go?" I hesitated. "Is it public?" He studied me for a moment. "There are crowds, yes. But we can stay at the back. There's a dock over the water that's usually empty." I found myself nodding. That night I wore a pale pink dress with sleeves that fluttered like wind chimes. Leo met me at the door wearing a navy jacket and no tie. He offered me his arm, not forcefully but gently, as if saying, "Only if you want." I took it. The festival was stunning. Hundreds of lanterns floated along the river, each carrying a whispered wish. "Do you have one?" he asked, holding a lantern out to me. I hesitated, then took the offered pen and wrote, "I hope I never forget what it feels like to choose myself." He smiled. I watched him write his, then placed both lanterns in the water. We stood in silence as they drifted away, golden light reflecting on the surface. Then just before the last lantern disappeared from view, Leo turned to me and said softly, "I didn't know you, but I noticed you. Before." I blinked. "Before. Your firm helped restructure a collapsed biotech merger in Tokyo last year. Your name was in the analyst notes. You were the one who spotted the forged subsidiary filings, weren't you?" I swallowed. "Yes." He nodded. "I wanted to poach you." I raised a brow. "And now?" He looked at me then, fully, without hiding. "Now I want you to rest." Meanwhile, back in Hong Kong, Adrian sat at his desk, staring at a printed client report in disbelief. The client, the one Mira nurtured from seed to tree, had withdrawn. No reason. Just gone. "Sir," Kara said, poking her head in. "Want me to follow up?" Adrian didn't respond. He was still looking at the email thread Mira once ran with that client. Her name was missing now. Erased from the CC lines. But the relationships. They weren't built on signatures. They were built on Mira. And Mira was gone. Kyoto never asked anything of me. Unlike Hong Kong, where every conversation was a transaction and every outing an opportunity, Kyoto breathed softly and let me exist. The city didn't care who I had been. It didn't care that I'd been replaced. It didn't ask why I had left. And maybe that's why I could finally start to hear myself again. I woke up to sunlight pouring through rice paper windows. The garden outside my suite glistened from early morning dew. A koi fish flicked the surface of the pond, sending soft ripples through the water. For the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel heavy. I spent my mornings sketching, ink brush work at first, then light watercolors. My hands were rusty. My lines weren't as clean. But slowly they began to move with memory again. Not for clients. Not for briefs. Just because I wanted to. Afternoons were long walks, tea ceremonies, quiet bookstore visits. Kyoto had a rhythm all its own. One I fell into like a second skin. Leo and I would cross paths occasionally. He never pushed. Never probed. But when I passed by the library one afternoon, he looked up from a novel and asked, "Do you paint only people or do you ever do places?" "I used to do both," I replied, "but lately I've been trying not to look back." He nodded once, accepting that answer with the kind of grace only someone truly patient can offer. It was a week later when the real conversation began. We were both sitting outside in the garden sipping matcha. "I looked you up," he said without pretense. I raised an eyebrow. That wasn't obvious at all. He smiled faintly. "You were the backbone of 5 successful exits in under 2 years. Strategic whisperer. That's what someone in Tokyo called you." I blew on my tea. I doubt they meant it flatteringly. "I did," he replied. I glanced at him sideways. "And what did the whisper say about you?" "That I don't talk unless it's worth listening to." I let out the smallest laugh. Is that intimidating? He asked, tilting his head. No, I said, looking back at my tea. It's refreshing. That night I opened my inbox for the first time in weeks. 42 unread emails. 10 from Adrian. The subject said everything. Where are you? Can we talk? You didn't have to disappear. We didn't do anything. You're overreacting. Miso misses you. And the final one. I made a mistake. Please come home. I didn't open it. I forwarded them all to a clean archive folder titled Irrelevant. The next morning I asked Leo if he knew any local galleries. Why? I want to start showing again. He didn't say anything at first. Then he nodded slowly. I'll call someone. No promises. But they'll want to meet you. Why? Because I'm asking. Back in Hong Kong, Adrian was unraveling. 2 of Myra's old clients had dropped within a week. Another account flagged a breach of contract clause, something Kara was supposed to track. And Kara? He was more shaken than useful. Should we contact her? She asked one night while reorganizing the project pipeline. Adrian rubbed his temples. She left. She doesn't want to be found. But don't you think she's behind this? He turned sharply. Behind what? Kara hesitated. The losses. The pullouts. It's all too precise. Adrian didn't answer. But the truth was beginning to crawl into his brain like cold water trickling into his collar. Mira had always been quiet, but never weak. And if she was behind it, then he had never understood her at all. In Kyoto, I met with a local gallerist named Yuki. She studied my work silently for 15 minutes. You left corporate? She asked finally. I nodded. For good. I don't know yet. She smiled. Then paint like you don't need to know. That's the only way we'll take it. And just like that, my pieces were added to a rotating exhibit. Kyoto reframed, foreign voices, local silence. The night of the opening, I didn't expect Leo to attend. He wasn't the public type. But there he was, standing in front of my favorite piece, a watercolor ink blend of falling sakura petals against a cracked porcelain bowl. I had titled it, Things That Break Quietly. He didn't say anything. He just stood, hands in his pockets, studying it like it meant something only he could read. I walked up beside him. You came. I wanted to see what you'd do with silence, he said. And he turned to me. You turned it into something that doesn't ask for permission to be beautiful. Later that evening we walked back under a sky scattered with stars. I didn't speak. Neither did he. But as we neared the villa he stopped. Mira, he said gently. I turned. I don't want to cross any lines. I know you didn't come here to be saved. But if you ever decide you're ready to build something of your own. He hesitated. Then added, not a life with me. Just a world where you aren't handed leftovers. I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time since I left Hong Kong, I felt like someone had handed me space. Not a seat. Not a role. Just a room to be. Let's see what that looks like, I whispered. It began with a phone call. Not from Leo. Not from a gallery. From someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years. Marcus Ching, one of the sharpest VC minds in Singapore. I had helped him secure a 10 billion yuan logistics deal with minimal PR noise. We worked seamlessly. I disappeared from his radar after that. But now, as I answered his call from my sun-drenched garden in Kyoto, his voice was crisp and curious. Mira Chin, he said almost in disbelief. You really did fall off the map. I needed space, I said simply, swirling the tea in my cup. Well, the world needs you back, he replied. I have a company in shambles and 2 analysts who couldn't strategy their way out of a paper bag. I need a brain. I don't need noise. Interested. Depends, I said. Who's backing the company? Boss. Leo Mori. I blinked. Leo didn't tell you? Marcus said, laughing. He's one of our main silent partners. Discreet but deadly. Very, you now that I think of it. I looked out at the koi pond, at the soft curve of sunlight on the water. I'll think about it. That evening, Leo met me in the villa courtyard. We were sitting in silence when I asked, why didn't you tell me you were Marcus's investor? He didn't look surprised. I didn't want you to feel indebted, he said. Or watched. I studied him. Are you watching me? No. I'm noticing you. There was a difference. And he understood it. I nodded slowly. Good. Because I'm about to step back in. The next morning I flew to Singapore. A direct flight, no announcements. Marcus sent a car. The firm was a wreck. Internal disarray, investor confidence in freefall, and the board at each other's throats. I met with his team in silence, absorbing data, cross-checking decisions, studying patterns. By the end of the week I handed Marcus a strategy binder. He stared at the cover. Silent restructure. Phase 1. You really live up to your nickname, he murmured. I smiled. You hired me for that. Back in Hong Kong, Adrian was unraveling. 3 of his top clients had terminated contracts. 2 others had flagged delayed compliance issues. Issues Mira had always handled with grace and foresight. His inbox overflowed with questions he couldn't answer. Kara was nervous. She tried to offer solutions. Adrian snapped more than once. She cried once and said, "I'm not Mira, okay? I'm trying." That was the first time he said nothing. He couldn't argue with it. Because she wasn't. A week later the dominoes began to fall. Strategic Alliance Holdings, a competitor firm, announced a quiet but powerful return to market with a new advisory partner. Industry blogs buzzed. Mira's name wasn't listed anywhere. But those who knew, knew. Because the pitch decks carried her signature logic. The resource sheets, her file structure, the proposals, razor sharp with hidden references only old clients would catch. I wasn't back loudly. I was back with precision. And that made it worse. Marcus took me to a rooftop dinner to celebrate our first recovered client. He lifted a glass. To Mira Chin, the ghost who haunts boardrooms better than half the men sitting in them. I chuckled. That's a bit dramatic. He leaned closer. No, it's not. I've never seen a comeback this surgical. I'm not here for revenge, I said quietly. He tilted his head. No. I swirled my drink. I'm here for balance. And balance was coming. Back in Kyoto, Leo sent a message. Leo, heard you flipped a Singapore firm in 8 days. Was it satisfying? I replied. He was clarifying. Also, stop letting Marcus stalk my career. He responded with a single emoji. One afternoon I walked into a quiet cafe near Marina Bay to sketch. A familiar voice made me freeze. Do you always draw like you're angry at the paper? I looked up. Daniel Liu. A former client. High level. Connected. And a quiet admirer. I draw like I want to remember what I felt, I replied. He smiled. Well, word is you've made some men in Hong Kong very uncomfortable lately. I just draw, I said with a small smile. Sure, he replied. And I'm just a guy sipping overpriced espresso. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. One of Adrian's biggest partners reached out to my office for advice last week. I looked up. He doesn't know what hit him. But he's starting to realize who. I stirred my coffee slowly. Did you tell him? No, Daniel said. But I showed him a painting. I raised an eyebrow. He smiled. The one with the cracked bowl and the falling cherry petals. I think he understood. Meanwhile, back in Hong Kong, Adrian stood in front of his mirror, tying a tie. His reflection looked older. Tired. His phone buzzed with another report. Another client lost. He turned to Kara. How many does that make now? 7, she whispered. He rubbed his face. How did she? She didn't do anything, Kara said, voice trembling. You did. You let her go. You let me in. He didn't reply. Because the worst part was, she was right. That night I returned to Kyoto. Leo was waiting at the villa, sitting in the garden with a book. He looked up as I approached. How was Singapore? Productive, I said. He stood. Did you find what you were looking for? I paused. Not all of it. But I found something else. What? Proof that I didn't need a seat at Adrian's table, I said. I needed to build my own. Leo smiled, slow and warm. And now, I said, I'm building more than just tables. There's a distinct power in re-entering a room that once humiliated you. Only this time you're not walking in alone. You're not walking in needing anyone to see you. You're walking in because you already know exactly who you are. The International Capital Summit in Singapore was the kind of high-profile event that Adrian used to gloat about attending. CEOs, politicians, hedge fund elites, all shaking hands over chilled champagne and hollow promises. I had no intention of going. I hated these rooms. I hated the eyes. But when Marcus emailed the final panel schedule, one name caught my attention. Sean Yao, my former client. The one who Adrian had tried and failed to secure after I left. Leo leaned over my shoulder while I stared at the screen. "You're considering it," he said, voice low. "I'm considering walking back into the fire I walked out of." He set his tea down. "Then I'll walk in with you." I turned to look at him. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said simply. "Not to protect you. Just I want to." And that changed everything. The night of the event, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the black silk wrap gown I'd chosen. Minimal. Clean lines. Quietly expensive. Jay had insisted I wear the diamond studs my grandmother left me. "They're like you," he said. "Delicate, but no one can ignore them." Leo appeared at my door just after 6:30 p.m. He wore a tailored charcoal suit with a midnight tie. No one else could make that much restraint look regal. But Leo did. He said nothing when he saw me. His eyes held me for a long moment. "You look..." He stopped, then simply offered his arm. I took it. The summit's ballroom buzzed like a hive. Cameras flashed. Names whispered. Waiters moved with the efficiency of ghosts. Leo and I entered through the side entrance and made our way toward the investors' table. I felt the shift before I saw it. Heads turning, conversations pausing. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just enough to stir the current. I glanced up and met Adrian's eyes across the room. He was standing near the buffet, a whiskey in hand, surrounded by a few second-tier COs trying too hard to be relevant. He saw me. Then he saw Leo. And the glass in his hand tilted slightly. Kara wasn't beside him. I had expected her to be. I had almost wanted her to be. But instead he was alone. His tie slightly loosened. A new line creased between his brows. I wondered if he even noticed. Leo didn't say a word. He simply guided me toward the front of the ballroom, where the roundtable discussions were about to begin. Our seats were marked. Mirachin, strategic advisor. Leo Mori, keynote patron. As we sat, I caught a murmur from behind me. "That's her, isn't it? The ghost strategist." "She's not a ghost anymore. Look at who she walked in with. She built strategic alliance from the ashes, didn't she? More like from silence." Leo leaned toward me, his voice brushing just above a whisper. "You're enjoying this." I didn't look at him. "I'm absorbing it." He smiled. Halfway through the panel, Adrian made his move. He approached the moderator table, likely hoping to insert himself into a question about post-pandemic client loyalty. Old Adrian would have done it with charm. This version was desperate. "I'd like to add that retaining a core team is about emotional synergy, not just deliverables," he said. I glanced up from my notes. "Interesting," I said aloud, voice level. "And how would you define emotional synergy? By tenure or by proximity?" The room chuckled lightly. Adrian's eyes flicked to mine, then to Leo, whose expression hadn't shifted. "I think both," Adrian replied stiffly. "Then one might say replacing someone before ending a commitment to them compromises both." Another pause. The air held its breath. Leo tapped his name card with one finger. An idle, composed movement, but everyone noticed. Adrian stepped back without another word. And just like that, the dynamic snapped. Later that evening, I stood by the glass railing overlooking the Singapore skyline. The air was heavy with heat and quiet conversations. Leo joined me, 2 glasses of chilled plum wine in hand. "I would have paid good money to watch that exchange on loop," he said. I laughed softly. I wasn't trying to embarrass him. "No," Leo agreed. "You were simply reminding him what he lost." I sipped the wine. "Do you think he regrets it?" Leo looked at me, and for a long second I could see the answer forming before he said it. "Every day," he said finally. Across the room, Adrian downed his third drink and watched Mira from afar. She was smiling, genuine, soft, and standing beside the one man Adrian had never managed to charm. Leo Mori was a problem. Too silent. Too private. Too powerful. And now he had Mira. Adrian remembered the night she left. No yelling. No fight. Just silence. An empty space in the closet. A note beside the sink. And now she stood here as if she had never even flinched. He gripped his glass tighter. As Leo and I walked toward the elevators, a soft voice stopped us. "Mira." I turned. Her Her hair was pinned up. Her makeup was lighter than usual. Her expression was tight, almost anxious. I hadn't seen her since the night she sat in my seat. Kara, I said evenly. She shifted awkwardly. I didn't know you'd be here. I could say the same. Pause. Then, I didn't mean to, she trailed off. You didn't have to, I replied. You knew what you were doing. Her jaw tightened. He was pulling away from you long before. Then why wait? I asked, voice sharper now. Why not walk in the front door instead of crawling through the cracks? Kara flushed. Leo stepped forward slightly. Not threatening. Just present. I didn't need him to speak. I'd already said enough. I turned away. Mira, wait, Kara called after me. Do you love him? I paused. Back. No, I said. But I know now what love isn't. And that mattered more. In the elevator, Leo leaned against the wall. Was that necessary? No, I said. Feel good. I looked at him. A little. He smiled. I hope you're ready, he said as the elevator doors closed. For what? For the next room you're going to walk into. The summit had ended, but the echo of it followed me like perfume. Light, persistent, clinging to everything. After we returned to Kyoto, I unpacked my suitcase in silence. The villa was quiet. Outside, the rain had started to fall in long, even sheets, tapping gently against the bamboo shingles. I didn't speak. Not at first. Not even when Leo came into the room, his hair slightly damp, a towel slung over his shoulder. You're not unpacking the red folder, he said. He meant the one from Marcus. The one containing 3 new strategic expansion offers, one of which would place me directly in Adrian's sector again. I stared at it on the desk. I'm tired, I said, folding a sweater. Leo didn't press. Instead, he disappeared into the kitchen. A few minutes later, he returned with ginger tea and a small bowl of candied plums. Sit, he said simply. So I did. We sat on the tatami mats, rain soaking the world outside. Can I ask you something? I finally said, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. Leo nodded. If you had found me first, would you have said something? He didn't look at me immediately. His eyes stayed on the rain. No, he said after a moment. You wouldn't have seen me. Why? Because you were looking at a man who didn't know how to hold you. That landed harder than I expected. I stared into my tea. That's the worst part, I think. I gave so much of myself to someone who never asked, but never stopped taking. Leo nodded slowly. And now, I continued, voice barely a whisper, I don't know who I am when I'm not holding everything together. That's when he did something unexpected. He reached for my hand. Not possessively. Not dramatically. Just steady. You don't have to be whole here, he said. You don't have to perform healing. You can just be. I met his gaze. And it was terrifying, how safe that felt. That night I couldn't sleep. The storm had passed, but the air was thick with memory. I stepped out onto the porch in my robe, feet bare, and found Leo sitting under the awning, a blanket draped over his shoulders. He didn't startle. Couldn't sleep either? He asked softly. No. He handed me the extra corner of the blanket. We sat in silence. Until I broke it. Do you know what hurt the most? I asked. He turned to me. That it wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was slow. Death by 1,000 small humiliations. Leo didn't interrupt. He started ordering coffee without asking me first. Stopped holding the elevator. Called me efficient instead of beautiful. One day he forgot my birthday. The next he remembered his secretary's favorite wine. The blanket was warm, but my voice felt cold. I kept shrinking to fit the spaces he gave me. And then one day there was no space left. Leo's jaw clenched. Subtly. But enough. Tell me something, I said, facing him fully now. Why haven't you kissed me? He blinked. Then said, because I respect you. I laughed, quiet but bitter. And because I don't want to be the next man who sees you as a consolation prize. The laughter died in my throat. He looked at me steady. I don't want you out of heartbreak. I want you when you're ready to want something again. The next morning I woke to a note. Gone to the mountains. You have a meeting with Yuki at 10. The gallery wants to extend your exhibit another month. P.S. There's fresh mochi in the fridge. Don't forget to eat. Well, he had left like mist, quiet, soft, barely noticed but deeply felt. That evening I got a call. "Marcus, we just got an inquiry from Westbrook Capital," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "They want to meet. Privately. And they requested you specifically." I froze. Westbrook was Adrian's last stronghold. They were reaching out to me. "That's a declaration," Marcus said. "You don't have to say yes. But Mira, if you want him to feel what it's like to be replaced." I didn't speak. I simply opened the red folder. And for the first time I wrote yes. 3 days later I flew to Tokyo. The meeting was brief, strategic, and polite. But the undertone was clear. They were considering leaving Adrian's firm for mine. And they weren't even trying to hide it. I didn't smile until I was back in the car. Leo picked me up at the airport. He opened the door. Drove in silence. Let me play music that didn't match the mood. It was only when we returned to the villa that he finally asked, "Was it worth it?" I turned to him. And then, without answering, I kissed him. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't passionate or desperate. It was quiet. Like everything we'd built. His hand moved to my cheek. My fingers brushed his collarbone. We didn't rush. We didn't pretend. And when we pulled apart, his voice was steady. "Was that a beginning?" he asked. I nodded. For both of us. The irony of moving on is that the past always knows when you've done it. Like it has some sixth sense for peace. Some built-in radar that triggers the moment you finally stop checking your phone or tracing your old wounds like Braille. That's when it calls. And for me, it came as I was standing in Leo's kitchen, humming softly, wearing his oversized Oxford shirt while slicing plums for a tart. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Then a third time, this time with a voicemail. I froze. The sound of his name still had weight. Not pain. Just gravity. I let the phone ring until it stopped. Then I played the voicemail. His voice was a shadow of what it once was. "Mira, it's me. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I shouldn't be calling. I know that. But... Pause. Things are falling apart. I didn't realize how much you held together. How much you've mattered. Not just to the firm. To me." Another long pause. Then, "I miss you. And I'm sorry." That was it. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I felt nothing. And that was how I knew I was truly done. Leo came in with a book in one hand and a pair of reading glasses he rarely used but always forgot to remove. He looked at me. Paused. "Something wrong?" I handed him the phone. He listened to the voicemail in silence. Then deleted it without asking. He placed the phone on the counter and kissed the side of my head. "You're here now," he said simply. Later that night, I received a message from someone I hadn't expected. He's unraveling. I didn't know how bad it was until now. He's not sleeping. Barely eating. He keeps looking for you in every corner of the house. I thought you should know. I stared at the message. Then typed one line in response. He let me go long before I ever walked away. The next week I officially signed the Westbrook contract. It made headlines in finance circles. Former chief strategist returns with a vengeance. Secures Westbrook from ex-fiance's firm. Adrian's company stock dropped 8% in a single day. I didn't gloat. But I did sit in the sun with Leo, sipping Jamaica, watching koi ripple across the pond, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Closure. I visited my old apartment in Hong Kong a week later. Not to see Adrian. To see myself, who I had been. Who I was no longer. The apartment had been sold. The new tenants had painted the walls, added bright cushions and mismatched chairs. I smiled. Good. Let the memories be painted over. As I walked through Central that afternoon, I stopped at a cafe I used to frequent. Same barista. Same lopsided plants on the windowsill. She looked up, stunned. "Mira? You're back." "Just visiting." She poured me a flat white without asking. "He came here for weeks after you left," she said. I didn't ask who. He used to sit in the corner staring at the door. Never ordered. Just waited. I stirred my coffee slowly. "Sometimes," she added, "we think love is about staying. But maybe it's also about noticing when someone's already halfway gone." I visited the park where Adrian and I used to walk after work. I sat on our old bench. A child ran by chasing a pigeon. A dog barked at a fountain. And suddenly Adrian was there, standing a few feet away, thinner, paler, older. "Hi," he said softly. I didn't move. Why are you here? I asked. To say goodbye. I nodded. He sat beside me. Not too close. I've been trying to fix things, he said. With the company? With everything. But it's like nothing works without you. I looked at him. You only loved me when I left. That's not true. It is, I said, quiet but firm. You loved the version of me that stayed. That endured. That shrank. He looked away. I stood. I hope you find peace, Adrian. But I won't be your redemption. When I returned to Kyoto, Leo was waiting on the porch, barefoot, holding a cup of matcha in one hand and a lemon in the other. You were gone longer than I expected, he said. I needed to bury a ghost. He nodded. Did it stay buried? Yes, I said. And I left a flower on the grave. That night I received another voicemail. This time from Kara. She was leaving Adrian. He doesn't see people. Not really. I see now that you were never the villain in this story. Just the only one brave enough to leave it. And in the quietest moment of the night I turned to Leo, pulled him close and whispered, thank you. For what? For not trying to fix me. He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. I didn't want the broken pieces, he said. I wanted the real ones. There's a moment in healing that doesn't look like fireworks or big breakthroughs. Looks like making breakfast and realizing you're humming again. Looks like catching your own reflection and not flinching. Looks like walking into the same kind of room that once broke you, and not folding under its weight. Leo had always said I wouldn't know when I was ready. I would just be living. And he was right. Kyoto's Lantern Festival came just as spring was turning the trees soft with pink blush and the scent of camellias. It was one of Leo's favorite nights, quiet, glowing, reverent. He'd take Jay each year to write wishes and hang them from the paper arches that lined the river. This time Jay insisted I come too. I'm writing 2 wishes, he said with mock seriousness. One for you, and one for me. Because clearly you don't write your own. He had grown taller lately. His voice just beginning to crack in places. But his eyes, those steady silver eyes, were pure Leo. As we arrived at the riverbank, the air shimmered with golden orbs floating on water. Thousands of paper lanterns drifted like stars that had come to rest. Leo handed me a wooden tablet and a calligraphy brush. Write something, he said. What? Whatever peace feels like. I thought for a long moment. Then I wrote one word. Enough. It was the first time in my life that I had felt it. We hung our wishes. Jay ran ahead with his friends. The night buzzed with laughter, soft flutes, and the scent of grilled mochi. Leo took my hand as we wandered down a path lit only by flickering lanterns. Do you know what I wished for? He asked. I shook my head. I wished you'd stay. I stopped walking. I've never asked you to, he said gently. I never wanted to trap you. I hope you know that wherever you go you'll never be alone again. The air stilled around us. Then he pulled something from his pocket. Not a velvet box. Just a string. A red thread. In my culture, he said, it's said that the gods tie an invisible red thread around the ankles of those meant to meet. It may stretch, tangle, but it never breaks. He wrapped it loosely around my finger. I don't need you to wear a ring to prove anything, he whispered. I just need to know you choose this. Choose me. Not out of pain, but out of peace. My heart thudded quietly. I looked at the red thread glinting in lantern light. And I nodded. I do. We didn't post pictures. Didn't throw a party. Didn't make an announcement. But in the weeks that followed, people noticed anyway. I stopped wearing black all the time. I laughed more. I answered emails with, hope you're well, and actually meant it. Marcus, over video call, raised an eyebrow at me. You're glowing. Should I worry? I shrugged. Maybe I'm just sleeping better. You're sleeping with someone better, he smirked. I didn't deny it. Then the package arrived. It came to the Kyoto villa, no return address, handwritten in block letters. I opened it carefully. Inside was a photo frame. One of us. Adrian and me, taken during the early years. Before the seat switch. Before the silence. I nearly tossed it until I saw the note inside. You deserved better. I couldn't give it to you. But I hope someone does. The handwriting was unmistakably his. There were no pleas. No selfish hope. Just acknowledgement. And that, too, was closure. Weeks passed. Leo and I traveled to Kamakura, then Florence. We visited my parents. He met my father, who liked him more than he liked me, I think. Jay started calling me Mimi again. His childhood nickname for me that I hadn't heard since the year of the breakup. "You're soft now," he said one evening, poking my cheek. "Like a person again." "Gee, thanks." He grinned. "You're not flinching every time someone says Adrian." I paused. "That obvious?" Jay shrugged. "I'm 12. Not blind." One night after dinner I found Leo on the roof, gazing at the stars. "Thinking about your wish?" I asked. He shook his head. "Thinking about the thread." I sat beside him. "I think I was always chasing people who never saw me," I said. "Trying to earn love by becoming smaller. But with you I don't feel the need to shrink." "That's because I've always seen the whole of you," he said. "Even the parts you tried to hide." I leaned my head on his shoulder. And for the first time in years I let someone hold all of me without apology. The day the headlines hit I was barefoot on a stone path trimming bonsai. Jay had just returned from school complaining about kanji homework and rice without enough salt. Leo was reading on the porch, a soft breeze stirring the linen of his shirt. And then my phone buzzed, nonstop. 5 messages from Marcus. 2 from journalists. 1 from Kara. The subject line was the same each time. Adrian Lynn's company crashes amidst insider scandal. I didn't click the article right away. I stared at the screen while the kettle hissed in the background, the scent of roasted barley tea curling in the air. Leo noticed the shift in me. He didn't ask, just set down his book and walked over. His hand touched the small of my back, warm, grounding. I showed him the phone. He read the headline silently, jaw tightening. Then he looked at me. "Do you want to know what happened?" I said, voice even. "But I don't feel the urgency I used to." So I tapped the article open. Falling Titan, Lynn Strategic Holdings faces collapse after whistleblower alleges misuse of client funds. My name wasn't mentioned. But in the attached image, Adrian stood outside a courtroom building, dark circles under his eyes, tie loose, mouth grim. He looked finished. The article cited a series of reckless decisions. Overpromises. Missing funds. Key investors, like Westbrook, pulling out one after another. Then came a quote from one of his former partners. "She was the backbone. When she left, we should have seen it coming." My throat tightened, not out of sadness but disbelief. Even now they saw me as the quiet piece that kept the machine alive. Not the woman who rebuilt everything from ashes. Later that evening I got a voice note from Marcus. "He tried to blame you in the beginning. But it didn't hold. Too many receipts. Too many clients already whispering about you being the real strategist behind the empire. You don't need to respond. Just thought you should know. You won." Leo found me on the balcony later, watching dusk roll in like a slow tide. "Do you feel anything?" he asked softly. I thought about it, then answered honestly. "Pity. Maybe. But mostly, peace." He gambled my loyalty, and when I walked he lost more than he thought. Leo leaned beside me, resting his forearms on the railing. "You didn't destroy him, Mira. He did that to himself." "I know," I said. "And that's why I'm not afraid to keep living." The next morning, Jay found a photo on the front page of a news app. It was me, standing beside Leo holding a signed partnership plaque for our new Shanghai Kyoto Design Fund. Caption read, "She left in silence, returned in power. The woman who outbuilt her ex-fiance's empire." Jay ran into the kitchen waving the phone. "Did you see this? You're literally trending." Leo looked up from his coffee. "Is it a flattering photo?" I laughed. Jay zoomed in on my half-smile. "You look terrifying and elegant. 10 out of 10. A week later Kara called. I hesitated before picking up. Her voice was different. Not sharp, not defensive. "Hi," she said. "I wanted to say something." I waited. "You were always more than what he gave you credit for. I used to think you were just convenient background, but I was wrong." I didn't speak. She continued, "He's been trying to find you." But I told him, maybe the best apology is staying gone. That I respected. "Thank you," I said quietly. She paused. "Are you happy?" "I am." Pause. Then a soft, rueful laugh from her end. "Good. One of us should be." 2 days later an envelope arrived. No name. No return address. But the handwriting was familiar. Inside was a single Polaroid, the seat. My seat. The one Adrian gave to her that night. Folded beneath the image was a note in his unmistakable script. I didn't know a seat could ruin everything, until I sat beside someone I didn't love and realized the one I did was already gone. No signature. I didn't need one. I burned the note in Leo's fire pit that evening, watching the flame curl over the paper and vanish into smoke. You okay? Leo asked, wrapping a shawl around my shoulders. I will be, I said. For the rest of my life. Later that week, Leo invited a few friends over for dinner. One of them, a sharp-tongued art critic, glanced at my wedding band and said, "So the rumors are true. You finally let yourself be loved properly." I didn't deny it. When Leo walked by, brushing his hand against mine, the critic nodded appreciatively. I see why he was afraid of him. That night as we curled up on the futon, Leo whispered, "You don't have to keep proving anything. You've already rewritten the ending." I closed my eyes. And smiled. Weddings aren't about diamonds, music, or the height of the cake. They're about standing still long enough to say, "This is who I choose," even after everything. And this time I didn't wear white to be seen. I wore it because I had nothing left to hide. We chose the mountainside shrine in Kyoto. It wasn't flashy or grand. There were no paparazzi, no crystal chandeliers or 10-tiered flower arches. Just soft moss beneath our feet, wind in the cedar trees, and people who had walked with us through silence, pain, and slow healing. Jay was our ring bearer. He wore a navy blue suit and grumbled about it all morning. "You're lucky I like you," he muttered, adjusting his crooked tie. Leo smiled. "We're lucky you're family." Before the ceremony, I stood alone at the edge of the woods, staring at the valley below. 10 years ago I thought love was about sacrifice. About giving until you were a hollow golden cage, admired but uninhabited. But now love felt like space. Like breath. Like sitting across from someone who saw the bruise and stayed, not to fix it but to hold your hand while it healed. When the music began, I walked slowly down the gravel path. My gown was simple, made of silk that flowed like water. No veil. No pearls. Just a thread of red wrapped softly around my finger. The one Leo tied on the night of the lanterns. He stood at the altar in a gray suit, eyes steady, hands trembling just slightly. It was the only time I'd ever seen him nervous. When the officiant asked for vows, I spoke first. Not because I needed to say everything, but because I finally knew how to say it. I once thought love had to be loud to matter. That pain meant depth. That waiting meant devotion. But then you showed me that love can be quiet. That peace isn't boring. That I am not hard to love. I was just loving in the wrong direction. Leo's eyes shimmered. I reached for his hand. "You never asked me to prove myself. You just made space for me to return to who I really was. So today I don't promise perfection. I promise presence. I promise to stay. And to make you laugh on days you want to scream." Leo exhaled shakily. Then it was his turn. "I don't know if I believe in soulmates," he began, voice low, steady. "But I believe in timing. And I believe that life sometimes brings us back to what we missed. Not because we deserve it, but because we're finally ready." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, a minimalist gold band with a tiny sapphire in the center. "I loved you when you were with him," he said. "I loved you when you left. I loved you in silence. And now I get to love you out loud." He slid the ring onto my finger. "Not because I won, but because you chose me." The guest stood as we kissed. It was soft. Certain. Undeniably ours. Later at the reception, a quiet garden dinner under string lights and cherry blossoms, Jay made a toast. He tapped a fork against his glass and stood. "I'm 12, he said, "so I don't know a lot about love. But I know what it looks like when someone waits." And Leo waited for Mira. Not like a hero but like a real person. So if this is what love looks like, I hope everyone finds it. He raised his glass of soda. To the people who waited. Everyone clapped. Leo wiped his eyes. I didn't even try to hide mine. That night, Leo and I stood barefoot in our home, the scent of lavender tea in the air, and lit 2 lanterns together. We sent them into the sky with no messages, just breath, hope, and the silent joy of a story that had finally turned the page. Somewhere in Beijing, I imagined Adrian watching our photos on his phone. He would recognize the smile on my face. But not the woman wearing it. Because this Mira? She was never his to begin with. Weeks later, a courier brought a package with no note. Inside was the red thread, framed in glass. Leo placed it in our bedroom above a small calligraphy scroll that read, "The seat she lost was never a throne. It was a cage. And when she stood, she never sat down again." Kept my last name. I didn't change for love, I changed for me. And the man I married didn't just respect that. He celebrated it. The end.